Okay, I have a couple of people that want to come up and say something to start with, so Goldie, you want to come up first?
Okay, this has been a week of several services to honor and remember our veterans. And for anyone who didn't have a chance to say thank you personally to one, we have one in our audience tonight. I thought we'd have two. We have Debra Honor, and it was her husband Lynn who hit the front page of the Chatham Daily News on Monday and has been in Chatham this week. Okay, I'm second cousin. So I think she needs a round of applause. And so a few months ago, they retired and are now, well, Lynn's been retired longer, but they're now back living in Chatham where Lynn was born. And both are interested in genealogy, so I think we'll be seeing a fair amount of them.
Thanks, Goldie. Where's Lynn? There's Lynn. Okay.
Just this past month, additional records are now available for service personnel who died during the Second World War. I had a cousin, Wesley Clark, who was killed in Holland, May the 5th, 1945. It was just a couple of days before the end of the war. And I had inquired perhaps about 15 years ago or so, maybe 14 or 15 pages. But when this new information came up, there are now 72 pages of information. Some of the pages are not that great, like maybe how many immunization shots he got. But some of the basic ones here is the attestation paper, which lists his entry, his application to be in the war. They've got his last pay certificate here. They've got an estate branch of the things that he had left when he was in Holland for. There is a casualty report, what he died from, and what his position was, where he's buried, the information on that, his last pay. Yeah, there are all kinds of records here. So the address in here, I got it from Ancestry CA. So if any of you have relatives that were killed in the Second World War, there is really a large pile of information. So if any of you want to look at some of these papers after the meeting, I'm very glad to show them to you.
Thanks, Lynn. Also, in the Chatham-Kent Senior magazine that's out right now, there's an article about the changes of the probate wills and the cemeteries. There was a small article in the newspaper, one of the newspapers this week, but this is a little bit more if you want to read about it. So I think you can pick these up at the library. So it's this here. Okay, I gotta get a drink of water. Okay. So welcome this evening to our Kent Branch genealogy meeting. I hope everybody's going to enjoy it for the evening. We have, of course, you know that the meetings are live streamed and that if you want to speak, you come up here. And if you want to be behind camera, stay where you're at. We'll bring the mic to you. What the OGS does is we preserve and promote family history for over 50 years. There's over 30 branches in Ontario. It's interesting. They have a conference once a year. They have all different websites that you can check out. And a members only section also if you are a member, and you can find it at www.ogs.on.ca. 2016 conference. It's going to be in Toronto this year, June 3rd to 5. And I think the applications or the registrations and so on for the conference are available now and not available yet. December 1st, okay, and then they talk about where you can stay and so on, so it makes it more convenient for you. So they seem to be very interesting and people have a lot of good things to say about them. Well, Kent County Branch here in Chatham, we have a general history room, and it's on the second floor of the Chatham Public Library on Queen Street. We do mentor, we assist, we have a quarterly newsletter, we have monthly meetings, and we have a lot of resources in our collection. There's a small look at what we have in our room. On that wall particularly is full of just families. That's people's research that they've done on their own families and have donated them to our library. So we have a lot of names up there and a lot of people. Kent Branch website is www.ogs.on.ca/Kent/, and we do have a Facebook group. It's quite informative, and it's a great group to belong to, so check it out. We did a tour of the land registry this past month, and it was very informative, and it was a lot of fun for everybody to go to. They certainly put out all the stops for us when we were there. I enjoyed it immensely, and I think everyone else that was there did as well. And I think Dawn wants to talk to us about this 1939 UK register that she's found.
Well, before that, a Remembrance Day. As many of you know, my dad is buried in Groesbeck Canadian War Cemetery, having been killed February 26, 1945 in the battle of Rochelle. And so I put a picture of a tombstone up on Facebook for Remembrance Day, and a fellow that I used to go to school many years ago messaged me and said, "Oh, my dad's buried in that cemetery too." So I looked him up, and his dad stayed on in Holland after the war, and he was killed in September of 1945, several months after the war. Anyway, I thought that was really so sad. Anyway, the 1939 UK Register. I know some of you are maybe not be interested in who is living where in England, but you know, my mother's always said that Aunt Kathleen's house was over the White Goods Grover. I'm not quite sure, but I'm going to find out. So this is taken. This is not to replace a census, but it's the most comprehensive survey ever recorded of the people of England and Wales. 41 million people captured in one day, and it tells the names, addresses, occupations, and everyone in England and Wales, and was used as a basis for rationing identity cards and in post-war Britain. I don't know what the NHS is, but whatever it is, they used it. And you can see the actual, I got on and found my great-grandfathers. The only thing is, if there's anyone on that survey who could still be alive, then that is closed, and you'd have to do a special request for that. And it is available through Find My Past, and I believe that the LGS Family History Centers would be able to give you access to those records.
Thank you, Donna. So we have upcoming events. November 17th at the Kent Historical Society is the Battle of the Living Ridge. Here at Sleepy Hollow historian, tour guide, and former history department head, Dennis Makowiecki. Let's move on. Bring to light this very important battle and time in Canadian history. And it's here at St. Andrews at 7:30. There's a reminder that in Kent Branch we will not be holding meetings in December, January, or February. We will see you in March of 2016. Perhaps with our town off, you can support the other local family history groups by attending some of their monthly meetings. Kent Branch is having our annual general meeting. Elections will be held for the following branch executive positions: chair, vice chair, treasurer, secretary. Committee chairs will be presented for your approval. please consider what role you might like to play at our branch. Tonight's presentation is Where There's a Will by Debra Honor. Please welcome Debra.
Holding one of these just isn't right. Because I'm too used to talking loud anyways, as a teacher. And I'll put that in. Okay, this is the one I want. And go forward and backwards and upside down and hi. Thank you for having me as your guest speaker. I always like coming back to Kent Branch and seeing everybody that I know and people I don't know. So, welcome. My title is Where There's a Will. These are the words that you would usually find at the beginning of a will. In the name of God, Amen. Or if they weren't quite so religious, this is the last will and testament of me. Of course, then they would add their name. Now, the words that were written, people write wills so that after their passing, others would know who would receive their property, their goods, and their chattels. And remember, you can't take it with you. Not everyone wrote a will, so don't expect to find one for everybody. Some wills have been destroyed because everything the deceased desired was fulfilled, or it was not fulfilled. Did women write wills? Once married, the property of a woman became her husband's. So through this talk, I will discuss where to find the wills in Ontario. I'm not covering the whole country or the whole world. I'm just doing Ontario. How to access the wills. And these two topics will be done sort of simultaneously. And what type of information does a will reveal? So the first place you're going to look is at home. This is where you get the freebies. You don't have to usually pay for them. You have to talk to family members. Sometimes people kept old wills of other family members. If a family member had a farm for many generations, it is possible that legal documents were kept somewhere safe to show proof of ownership. This is our box from Robert's house, my husband's house that we live in. We own his grandparents' house, and we are on the Honor farm that's been in the family since 1869. So this box carries all the legal documents that go with our farm and also with other pieces of property that the family owned. And it was kept in a secret drawer of the dining room buffet that we no longer have. Okay, so you can't go and find it there now. So in this box is a copy of Matthew Elliott's will. Matthew Elliott was the loyalist who was granted our piece of property back in the 1790s. He actually was granted 3,000 acres, so our 200 acres just wasn't quite the whole amount. But we have a copy of his will. We have a copy of his wife's will, Sarah Elliott's. In the box are also mortgages, deeds, insurance policies, papers that say that Aunt Susan was paid her inheritance by another aunt in installments. So we know exactly the dates she was paid. There is also an envelope that has one word on it, Jane. And inside is a lock of hair. Because Robert's great-great-grandmother died at a young age, and this was a remembrance of her for the children. So it's a very important box in our house to have that many different pieces of information. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about Matthew and Sarah Elliott's wills. On the left is Matthew Elliott's will, and it's a copy. Okay, no photocopiers in those days. They had to handwrite everything. And when it was not the original will, It will always stay copy either at the top or on the back. On the other side, it's printed. It's print type. It's not handwritten, but that's a piece from the probate office. The handwritten will is underneath. Okay? And so they would just fill in the blanks for the probate. Now, Matthew Elliott was born in 1739. He died in 1813 at the age of 74. Sarah, his wife, was born in 1792. She died in 1869. But at the time of her husband's death, when he was 74, she was 21. She bore him 2 sons. And the one son, yes, that's 53 years difference. Okay. She did bore him 2 sons, and one was born the year that he died. So, okay. As a loyalist, Matthew received a lot of land, plus he would have traded and bought property. At his death, he had 12 200-acre plots in Malden Township, 5 200-acre plots in Gosfield Township, 6 200-acre plots in Mercia Township, and 1 200-acre plot in Dover Township. He made it to Kent. He divided his property equally among his 3 children. He had an Indian wife before. One son died during the war of 1812. The other one survived. So he divided his property between the 3 sons and equally with his wife. The wife 2 of the sons got the property closer to Malden Township. And Sarah was actually given property in Mercia and the property in Dover. Okay? In Dover, it was lot 22. It doesn't say what concession, so I'm wondering, I was looking at a map of Dover, and Dover's a really weird shape. And I'm wondering if it's that strip that goes up, straight up, that it might be on. There's 2 lots that say 22 that I noticed on the map. But it doesn't say a concession, so I don't know which piece. Sarah in her will was holding the mortgage. So by the time she dies in 1869, she probably sold that piece of property or traded it for something else. I don't know. But it does say in her will that she was holding a mortgage for a George Thomas on a certain parcel in Chatham, which she wanted her grandson, Frederick Eugene Elliott, to use to pay off the debts of her son, Robert Harriet Barclay, who was Frederick's father, and maintain the family of the son who had just passed away. So a will can give you information about what's happening in the family at the time as well. Okay, second place to look is the land registry office. And I hear you've just been there. So you all know how to find the wills now, right? I don't have to talk about this? Okay, so wills were used to prove ownership of the property after the death of an owner. A probated will. Probated means you have to prove. You have to prove that the person died. That's what probate means. If you probated your will, it costs money. Farmers are land poor. They don't have a lot of money. You don't want to do probate. So there's a cheaper way. It's called free. You like free? So if a farmer's family registered the will through the land registry office, there was no need to probate, so therefore there was no cost. That's why you will find wills in with the land registry office. Now, you need to know the location of the property. So you need to know the county, the township, the concession number, and the lot number. Municipal lots will also be included in the land registry office the same way. Okay. Now, this is out of my box too. We had a copy of an abstract from the land registry office. Every piece of property has an abstract. And the abstracts tell you the instrument number, what kind of instrument it is or what kind of document it is. Then it tells you the date it was they had written it, and then the date that they registered. Sometimes those dates are the same, and sometimes they're different. Then it tells you who had the property and who they gave it to is the second name, okay? So that's how you read that paper. They used to be great big huge books in the land registry office. Everything now is on microfilm. But that's what you need. Now, somewhere in my pocket, I'll have one of these. Aha. So you got the instrument number there, and you will need that number if you want to get a copy of the document. The next thing tells you what kind of document it is. It's a deed, it's a mortgage, or it's a will. And over here it says Thomas Honor, and you have to see the will of. So you would ask for that document number there, and they would be able to look it up on the microfilm, and they would give you a photocopy of it. So that's great. That's how to find a will. Now, the next way of doing it is through Applerod. This was a group that was started in about 1998, and it was started because, and it's called the Association for the Preservation of Ontario Land Registry Office Documents. That's what Applerod stands for. The Land Registry Office government did not want to pay the rental fees to house all of the documents anymore. It was costing them too much money to keep them in storage. So what they were planning on doing was destroying all of the documents. They didn't need them anymore. They were starting a new way of doing land registry records. And so you didn't need to prove all the way back to Matthew Elliott anymore. There was an awful lot of genealogists who were upset about this. And what we did was we went to all of the land registry offices, and we recorded every single type of document was there. They didn't just find documents. They also found that people had left their jewelry there as a safekeeping and other things. So we now have a documentation of what kinds of things that they found in the land registry offices. There is one bad thing about this. All of the records for Toronto had already been destroyed. They're all on microfilm, but the originals have been destroyed. Now, once all of the documents were figured out as to what was there, then they divvied them up. And a lot of the counties kept them in one spot. Essex County, we divided it up everywhere. Like all these different historical groups have the records. I found just lately when I started doing this talk on wills that the Ontario Archives wants all the wills from the land registry offices. So all of these groups who have these documents had to hand the wills into the Ontario Archives. Okay? There is a website at the bottom of the page that I have here that Fawn wrote after we had finished all the documentation. So Applerod no longer exists. But that document there, the URL that's at the bottom in blue, at Global Gazette, will tell you exactly where the documents are. Okay? So for Enver County. Locations of land registry office records. Well, you can find them in museums. You can find them in local history groups, libraries. I'll talk about the copybooks at the universities in a minute, and the Ontario Archives. Now, some of the counties had no place to put their documents, so the Ontario Archives took them. They also took all of the townships that had an Indian reserve on them. Probably because of legal hassles with the native people at this point, you need to have access to those land property, all that land documents. So all of those were automatically taken by the Ontario Archives so that the government could use them for litigations. They also took other counties that nobody else wanted. They didn't have any place to put them. So I'm gonna give you Essex County is a little bit of an anomaly. It doesn't follow the rules for it like everybody else does. They didn't have one place to put them. So we've got the Marsh Collection in Amherstburg, has Amherstburg and Malden Township. They have about 100 wills. Ayers is in Harrow, and they've got Harrow and Colchester, north and south. Now what they did was they handed in all the wills, but they made photocopies of them before they sent them. Smart people. And instead of having them in one place, they added them to all the family folders that they have. So if you're looking for the Hazel family, they will be in with the Hazel family research files that they have, okay? So it makes it a little bit easier. You don't have to look in two places for that family. Kingsville Gosfield Heritage Society has done the same thing. They've got Kingsville Gosfield, and they've done it in family files as well. Now, the University of Windsor has the copy books for Essex and most of the Kent County. I don't think they've got all of them. Copy books were before photocopiers. So they would have a really nice person to write out all of the documents in a book for each lot and concession number. Kent County, you are blessed. Because the person didn't do it just for lot and concession number. He did it alphabetically by people's names. So you can go to the University of Windsor in the basement and you can get access to the copybooks and you can look up your family name and it'll tell you every single piece of property that that person owned. They don't do that in every county. You guys are blessed. Now, the Ontario Archives, I said, has Anderton Township and anyone that they couldn't find a home for. I also have a copy of that, of Fawn Stratford DeVay's paper, or her document here, if anybody wants to look at it for a different county. Kent County, the documents are all at the Archives of Ontario. For Lambton County, they're at the Lambton County Library in Wyoming, which is where Lambton Branch's library is as well. Okay, so you can go to those places and look. Sorry, yours are all of the archives, but it's really nice there. Now, this is what I found when I went to the Archives of Ontario. I hadn't been there since it was the old place. It was my first time this spring that I got to go to the archives. And this is what they've done. They are now microfilming everything that they have on the land records. I think they realized after Applerod went and did their work on the land records that these actually were very good for the archives to keep. So I think they are collecting, I could be wrong, but I'm thinking that they're collecting every county as much as they can. And then it'll all be in one spot. So this is the paper for Essex County. They have not microfilmed every county yet. So I don't know if Kent County has been done, but this is what they've got for Essex County. Whoops, let's try that again. I was looking for my red button. Over here are the old film numbers, and over here are the new microfilm numbers. So they would have a new document like this for every county that they have done so far. And at some point, all of them will be done. So Ontario Archives is a great place. Okay. Now, papers. Oh, I got to put it here. Land registry records are at the Ontario Archives. Okay. Ontario Archives, even before they got the land registry records, had the records of the court of probate and for the surrogate courts. We no longer have the court of probate. Court of probate started before 1859. That's when it ended. And the wills were probated either by the province-wide court of probate or the surrogate courts. The court of probate, which is series RG 22-155, you can find them online, at least the index, okay? Handled estates with properties valued over £5 or that extended over 2 or more districts. Okay, think about your district. Does anybody know what district Kent's in or was in? Western District, that's a district. The district would include Essex, Kent, and Lambton counties. So all three counties are in one district. If somebody had property in Kent County and in Middlesex County, which would have been London District, then you would have to go through a probate courts. Otherwise, you go through surrogate court records. But that only goes up to 1859. Now, we're in the Western District. So remember, the Western District Surrogate Court is not in Chatham. It's in Sandwich. So the court in the early records are in Essex County, even for Kent and Lambton, because it's Western District. So that's before 1858. I think by then there was enough of a population that they could start making counties. And that's why they amalgamated them all into the surrogate courts. So everything is in surrogate courts now, records. So from 1785 to 1930, the registers, also known as the probate and administrations books, are on microfilm that can be borrowed through interlibrary loan from the archives. So if you go on the Ontario Archives website, it's a bit of a process, but you have to go through, you have to order the microfilms for the years, and then for the indexes, and then it'll tell you which microfilms you need to get the copies of the wills and the administration letters. So it's go to the website and figure it out. But you'll need your library to get the copies of that, or you can go to the Ontario Archives and they've got them. Okay? All right. Surrogate court records in the last 40 years. So from now back to 1975 is 40 years. They're located at the County Superior Court of Justice Estates Division. So change that word county to any county you want. Essex Superior Court, Kent Superior Court, Lambton Superior Court. They're at the court. You have to go to the Superior Court to get a copy of them. You must have the name of the deceased and the date of death. The cost is expensive. Now, I had to do this for our church. We needed a copy of a will of somebody who had donated money to our church. It was $61 just for them to retrieve the will. If I wanted it to be photocopied, they at least let me look at it before they photocopied. If I wanted it photocopied, it was $22 for the first 5 pages and $2 per page afterwards. Now, if the will had already recently been sent to the Ontario Archives, they would give me back my $61, and I just have to get it from the Ontario Archives for a lot cheaper. So try not to look for wills before 1975. Your other resources. Now, wills aren't always in the places that you expect them to be. There is a magazine, and it's still published by the government. It's called the Ontario Gazette. And they have legal notices that were published. Now, these can be found at the Ontario Archives as well. The only problem is they are not indexed. Very difficult to go through. But then underneath there, I've got journals. Sometimes you can find a journal that names these things. I found the Ontario Register, Volume 7, Number 1, 1983, and it had the legal notices from the Ontario Gazette in 1870. So just that one date. But these legal notices that I found was for somebody who had died before he wrote his will, which is called intestate. That means that they didn't write a will before they died. So you have to use other legal documents to prove the ownership of their property. So this is what I found. I have a petition telling me when he died, and named all of his children as his heirs at law. And the petition was made by George Reevely, who was the oldest son. And in that will, down near the bottom is my important part here. So this was written in 1870. Mark Reevely died in 1857, so that's like 13 years later they're putting in a legal document. So if you're doing an intestate will, it's going to take a lot of years. But down here it's got all of the children of Henrietta Butler, who was born a Reevely. So she's one of the daughters. She's passed away by 1870. And so it names all of her children as her heirs at law. So right in this one document, I now know who her father is, who she is, and who her children are. I've got proof of those 3 generations. Now, that led me to the land registry records. They keep coming in handy, don't they? So this is the land registry office for lot 23, concession 4. Wyndham Township, Norfolk County. Sorry, I don't have everybody living in Kent. But what's really neat about this is there's an indenture. Whoops. I need the other button. Right up here, it's got a star beside it. It says 21799. And usually these numbers go chronologically. There's spaces in between because okay, this person died on this property, this person sold this piece of property, and each one goes chronologically. So all of these numbers should be in chronological order, but they're not, because this one is 22163, and this one is a 155. Something's wrong with these numbers. They should have been in order. But what's really weird about this is the first page for that lot and concession number. And down here is the first entry as the grant from the Crown. What's above that? It's that 21799. They needed room to add all of the children as the heirs at law. So instead of writing it in that space where they should have written it, they wrote it on the first page. So sometimes you have to read more than just one page. Okay, so what do wills reveal? They reveal the spouse of the deceased, usually, children of deceased, grandchildren of deceased, siblings of deceased, property, both land and personal effects, and how the deceased would like the property to be divided. Now, if you're doing any kind of lineage ancestry, this is primary proof, because you're getting it from the horse's mouth if it's from a will. Hopefully he tells the truth, or she. Okay, now in the letters of administration, so after the person dies and a will is probated, then you've got all of the people that he left as the executors and the executrixes to prove that they're doing exactly what he had asked them to do. So that's what the letters of administration are. And in sometimes they give you the date of death of the deceased. So if you don't know the date of death, and you can find the letters of administration, you will have a death date. So let's start with some of these wills. The one that I've got right now is with Abram Truax. And if you notice at the top, it says Surrogate Court Records of Essex County, 1847. So before that 1859 date. So on the 12th of May in that year of 1847, he is Abram Truax Sr. of the Township of Romney in the County of Kent, in the Western District. So even though it's in the Surrogate Courts of Records of Essex County, remember that's Western District. Okay? And when you look at the records for probate in the Ontario Archives, they have the names listed of everybody. When I went to look for Kent County, it didn't say Kent, it said the township instead of the Kent County, okay? So if you know what township they're from, you can look for that in the list as well. It tells that he gave his property to his son Martin, the southwest part of lot number 14 in the 3rd concession line in the township of Romney. 50 acres. Now, Martin Truex, you don't get property even from your family for free. You have to do things. So Martin was told that he must give his sisters, Rebecca, Caroline, and Susanna, one good cow at the time that such of them get married. Okay? So in other words, those 3 are not married. They're spinsters. They're probably younger before their dad dies. So he has to take care of them even after death. So it has to do it through his son. The other thing Martin has to do is maintain and support his mother, Jane Truax, in a comfortable manner while she lives. So you get the property, but you also get the mother, and you get the sisters, and you got to take care of them. The executors that are named on the will are Henry Healy and Michael James Fox. I'm related to Michael J. Fox. Now they're from Gosfield Township. They were son-in-laws of Abram. Okay? The will was probated the 5th of March, 1850. Oh, let's go back. He made his will the 12th of May, 1847. He died. There's the letters of administration. And it says he died, deceased this day, the 28th day of October in the year of our Lord, 1849. So 2 years after he made the will. And it was probated in March of 1850. So they didn't waste a lot of time, by about 4 or 5 months since the death. Abram and Jane had 16 children. 6 were sons. Martin was the youngest son. All of the rest of the children are not really mentioned in this will. So he probably already took care of them before he died, before he wrote his will. And the 3 daughters named were younger than Martin. And that makes sense because they were still spinsters. Henry Healy had married a Mary Truax, and Michael James Fox married Elmira Truax. Now, nice thing about some wills is they give you an inventory. It tells you everything that he owned at the time of his death. So he's got 5 cows, 2 heifers, 2 yearlings, 2 steers, 14 hogs, 1 horse, 1 set of harness, 5 sheep, 1 plow with harrow, 1 fanning mill, 10 fat hogs, and household furniture. Household furniture, 3 pounds. The total of that whole amount there is only 42 pounds 15. I think there are websites on Google or on the internet that can transfer that money into what it would be worth nowadays. But it's sort of neat to see exactly what did somebody own at the time of death for this time period. Okay, the next one. This is a will from Toronto. This is the will of Richard Comer Ross, late Lieutenant of the Royal Navy. He loves saying that. It's in every single document about him. As far as I knew at the time that I found this will, he had 6 children, and the eldest son was George Hamilton Ross, who was Robert's great-great-great-grandfather. Richard did not name, this is the only piece of paper for his whole will. That's the whole will. It's a short one, isn't it? Some of them are very long. But Richard did not name all of his children in his will. He only named his eldest son. So when I got the will, I found out George Hamilton Ross was not his oldest son. And here it says, my eldest son, James Athan Ujo Ross. And he's giving him the sum of £1 and 5 shillings. to be paid to him by his wife, who is his only executrix, when demanded. Well, he didn't live in the area, so who knows when he would be coming home and asking for the £1, 10 shillings, or 5 shillings. Everything else went to the wife. All of the other children were married, they had their own families, they were already settled. Who does he have left to take care of? His wife. And she would be around the same age as him. Both of them would have been older. After he died, she became a dressmaker in New York. So he didn't really have a lot to leave even to her. And this is the letter of administration. And if you look down here at the bottom, the will is of the value of about £285 of lawful money. That's all he had left. So everything went to the wife. She did live with George Hamilton Ross. He was the last child to leave the house. She died a couple of years later, and then he moved down to London where the rest of his family was, the rest of his brothers, were living. Okay, next will. Okay, I wanted to show you what microfilm readers can do to your copies of microfilm. This is a copy of Rudolf Hoffman's will in 1839. And it's very important to read that very beginning of a will, being weak in body, but of sound mind. You can be sick, but you can't be crazy. So you have to say in your will that you still have it up here, so you know what you want done with your property. So that's why you have to put in I have a sound mind. Oh, I forgot one thing. Richard Comer Ross, I told you he was in the Royal Navy. He was a lieutenant. Now, if you look at the bottom, how did he sign his name? With an X. So if a person signs their name with an X, what do you usually suspect? Illiteracy. Somebody who is a lieutenant in the Royal Navy would not be illiterate. He cannot be illiterate. Therefore, what would be the other excuse? No. He's too sick. He's too sick to sign his own document. So remember that. You have to know what the occupation of the person is to think about that X. He's not illiterate. His job would have been writing out documents and proving things. And so I forgot to point that out, sorry. There we go. Okay, back to Rudolph's. So this is a copy of Rudolph's from a regular microfilm reader that you can put your memory stick in. And it doesn't look all that great, does it? You've got the big light at the back of the machine and part of it's black. If you go to the Ontario Archives, they've got all these things on microfilm. They have microfilm readers that have computer screens. That's the same will. So if you want better copies of your wills, go to the Ontario Archives and use their machines. And put it on a memory stick for free, But it looks like a brand new document, doesn't it? So much easier to read. Now, in Rudolf Hoffman's, I'm only going to mention, he wrote quite a long one and he gave a lot of stuff to different people. But the purple at the bottom, I also bequeath an order that provided the land should pass into the possession of strangers, or that any difficulty might arise on account of the burying ground, because he had a family burying ground on his farm, I hereby reserve and will 1/4 of an acre for a graveyard for the use of my descendants. Oh, I get water. Thank you. I never drank when I taught. Okay. I'm used to having a dry mouth. Okay. So this is his letters of administration, and in this it tells you his will was written the 5th of September 1839. He died the 9th of October 1839. And the will was probated on the 7th of November, 1839. Whoa, 1 month, bang, bang, bang. He had everything done. Departed this life on the 9th day of October, was in Sandwich. And we talked about the cemetery. There's the cemetery, and that's a new tombstone that the family had put up with everybody's name that was buried in that cemetery. So that cemetery is still there. Hard to find because it was on the family farm, but it is there. That picture is actually off of the website, off the internet. Okay. Next one is Philip Butler. This is one of the first wills that I ever found, and he is my great-great-great-grandfather, born in 1788 in New Brunswick, died in 1866. Now, for his first two children, Daniel H. Butler is my ancestor. He's his eldest son. He gave him $5, he having had his share of my property. So in other words, the two older sons already got property bought by their father, and they already owned it. Unto Robert, he gave half of the homestead. Unto Abner, he gave the other half of the homestead. Now, Abner had to take care of the comfortable maintenance of his wife Jane during her natural life or widowhood. And you understand that if a woman remarried, everything automatically went to the children. Because if a woman remarried, all of her property goes to the new husband, and therefore your children are out of luck. They don't get it. So in a will, you have to say, if a woman remarries, she loses title to any property that he has left her, because he wants everything to go to his children. Most of them do this when the wife is, and she was 20 years younger than he was. Matthew Elliott did it for his wife. So even though she was 21, she was smart. She never remarried. There are rumors that she had some flings, but she never remarried. Okay, so Abner gets half the homestead. He's got to take care of the mother. Robert gets the other half. Finley gets the sum of $1,500, which Abner and Robert have to pay to him. So this is how he's divvying up so that everybody gets something. He has 3 daughters. He gives each daughter a town lot that he owns in Simcoe. And then what comes up is to my grandson. Now he's got lots of grandchildren, but to one grandson, Francis Elmer, and it states, son of Daniel H. Butler. He gives him $500 when he reaches the age of 21. If he dies before the age of 21, all of that money is to be divided among his half-sisters and brothers. And there's 5 of them. Why is Francis Elmer getting money from grandfather when the rest aren't? Daniel Butler was married 3 times. The first wife died in childbirth. Usually, the child survived. This is Francis Elmer. Usually that child goes to the wife's family to be raised. Daniel did not raise his son. But because there was, and I found this out through other people's tracing of the Sinden family, the mother had died, the father remarried, and they didn't want the child. So the children, the parents of Daniel, the father, raised Francis Elmer. So he's basically another son to this grandfather, not a grandson. So that's why he's getting special treatment. Now, he bequeaths to my dear wife, Jane Butler, all my cows and all the sheep and 1/3 of the produce of the fruit of the orchard and all my household furniture, beds, bedding, linen, and crockery for her own use and disposal, except a certain, and I can't read this word, but it looked like Rhiannon, which I bequeath to my 2 daughters, Harriet Ann and Eliza Ann, one of them to purchase the other's right on it. What a battle that must have been. If the 2 of them wanted it and Dad didn't want to say which one was to get it. Oh. And then he says, and I bequeath unto my wife the undisturbed use of the east half of the new brick house on my said homestead farm, and her comfortable maintenance, to which the said lands devised to Abner Butler. So he has to take care of his wife. He has to give her half of the house for her to live in for the rest of her natural life, or until she's no longer a widow. So there's another piece of the will. There's what I just was reading. Elmer. There's the house. It's still standing. So it was built in 1865, so that was his new house. And as far as I know, there is a member of the Butler family still on that farm. Okay, one last will. Well, it's 3 wills, sort of. Okay, Robert and I have done an awful lot of research on the Reynolds family, and they are the ones that own Bellevue in Amherstburg, okay? If any of you know that house. Thomas Reynolds was was the commissariat for Fort Malden. So he was the one who ordered all the supplies, the food and the rum, and not the cannonballs. He was getting sick. He was getting old. His son wrote to the government and asked for his dad's job. So he took over his dad's job as the commissariat. So he wrote his will on the 18th of March, 1811. The will was probated the 6th of June, 1811. We do not have a letters of administration. We don't know the exact date. Therefore, he died somewhere between those 2 dates. That gives you an idea. Now he has Thomas. We've got Thomas married to Jean Goodfellow. They have 5 children: Margaret Reynolds, Thomas Augustus, Ebenezer, Robert, and Catherine Reynolds. There's 2 girls. Both girls never married. Thomas Augustus Reynolds joins the Royal Navy. He ends up living in England. He's not being left anything in Canada. So we've got Ebenezer and Robert. They're the only 2 left. Ebenezer and Robert both marry sisters. Now the important one is Marie-Thérèse Bouchette. And that's because she was married before, but her husband died in a duel. His stepfather was James McGill of the Northwest Fur Trading Company of Montreal. In his will, he left property to Robert Reynolds as his son-in-law, but he also built from his will, money from his will, McGill University. This is a family connection to the Reynolds family. So Robert Reynolds married well. An awful lot of money. Okay, so let's talk about Thomas's will. In Thomas's will, he has Robert and his wife Jean as his executors. And he leaves the tract and parcel of lands in the township to his wife of Colchester in Essex County. And this piece of property was being occupied by his son Ebenezer. So he didn't leave it to Ebenezer, he left it to his wife. And Jean Reynolds, and for her natural life, because she was about the same age as him, all my lands and tenements situate, lying, and being in the township of Chatham and Kent County. So here's another example where somebody living in Amherstburg actually owns property in Chatham. Should she outlive him, Thomas divides the Kent property between the 2 daughters, Margaret and Catherine, the 2 that never married. Of course, at that point, he wouldn't know. 500 acres to each daughter. And if there was anything left over, it was to go to his son, Robert. Paying off the debts, Jean and Robert were left all the land in Gosfield and the land in Malden Township and the town of Amherstburg. So anything in Essex County was left to Jean and to Robert. All the rest of his goods and chattels he left to his wife. Most of the time they leave their bedding to their wife, their beds and things like that.
Yeah, really.
Jean, the wife, gets everything after her husband's death. She shares the property with son Robert in Gosfield Township, Malden Township, Amherstburg, and Essex County. In 1812, Jean Reynolds is known as one of the 10th wealthiest people in Amherstburg. Now, in the surrogate court records, we have the will for Jean Reynolds. Now, she appoints her dearly beloved son, Robert Reynolds, as her executor. Nobody else, just him. And after her debts after all of her debts are paid, she gives the property in Colchester, not to Ebenezer, to her two daughters, Margaret and Catherine. She gives Margaret and Catherine the property in Kent County that her husband had promised them. And she gives and bequeaths everything else that she owns, her bedding and chattels and things like that, all to her daughters. She signed the will on the 29th day of November in the year of our Lord, 1812. Jean Reynolds gives all of her property that is not already shared with Robert, like Robert has to get that stuff. Anything that she had of her own, everything was given to the two daughters. So let's go through some of these dates. We've got Robert Reynolds taking over his father's position as commissariat in 1811. We have the War of 1812, starting on the 18th of June, 1812. Jean wrote her will on the 29th of November, 1812. Why do you think she'd leave everything to the daughters? There's a war. Men don't necessarily survive a war. Even if the Americans take over, they might take pity on women owning land and they might give it to them. It's probably something like that as to why she would leave everything to the daughters. Now, Jean outlived the war. That was good, but she never wrote a different will. She died on the 30th of March, 1826. Now comes the zinger. Her son Robert did not probate her will until 1843. Now, when I'm looking through this list of things on the Archives of Ontario, I'm looking at the dates as well as the people's names. I'm looking, Jean Reynolds, 1843, but she died in 1826. That can't be her. I was wrong. It was her will. He probated it much later, but he had control over everything. His two sisters lived with him in Bellevue their whole rest of their lives. His brother, Ebenezer, when he was ill and about ready to die, he lived with Robert Reynolds in his house. All of them died in Bellevue. Now we've got Robert Reynolds. Remember, he got all that land and he did quite well, right, by his parents. He did not write a will. You think so? Now, Ebenezer and his wife had no children. The other brother's in England, doesn't count. The two sisters didn't marry. Robert and his wife, Therese, had 5 children. Only one lived to be an adult. And his name was Robert Todd Reynolds. And he was a doctor. Do you know where he went to school? He went to McGill. He was in the 3rd graduating class as a medical doctor from McGill in 1836. His son bought Robert Reynolds' property, and he gave him a life lease. In other words, Dad, here's some money. You can live in the house as long as you want to live. And when you're gone, it'll be my property. Therefore, there's no need for a will, because anything that he didn't have in property would have been given to him anyways as the only surviving child of that family. So, and Robert was very good because he took care of everybody else in his family. He was literally the last one of his generation to die. He took care of his 2 sisters and he took care of his brother. So let's review. Where are you going to look first for a will? At home and among your family members. Next, you're going to go to the Ontario Archives. It's the best place that has different kinds of wills. You've got the probate and surrogate courts. You've got the wills from the land registry offices already there. Microfilm you can get at number 3 at the land registry office as well for each county. Applerod has a distribution, so you can look at that list and see where those documents might also be. And the other locations were museums, libraries, local histories, copybooks at the universities, the Ontario Gazette, and journals. So good luck, and thank you for listening. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
Sure.
You say that you can go to the Windsor Circuit Court for ethics and Kent.
No, those records are old enough that they'll all be at the Ontario Archives.
So they're not down there.
The ones that would be there would be the last 40 years, back to 1975. Next year, 1975 will be sent to the Ontario Archives, so it'll be up to 1976. Okay? Just the latest ones are at the circuit courts. Anything else?
Debra can give you a bit of information on what Catherine and Margaret did with their property.
Oh, can you?
Because I did find that this summer, I was looking at it, the museum was doing something.
What happened to it?
Well, they sold it to their brother for a little.
Stand up, thanks.
They sold it?
Robert buys it from each of them for a wee bit of money, not standard market prices.
Okay, so the person at the back said that Robert Reynolds bought the property in Kent County from his 2 sisters, Catherine and Margaret. But considering he was taking care of them in his house, I think that would be a good choice.
I can
But
give you the dates and I go home and look it up.
I will give you my email address because I'd really like to have that information. Thank you very much.
Because what they were 2 old ledger books that came to the museum.
Mhm.
And I'm doing some volunteer work there, and I transcribed them. And I basically took pages and pages of longhand and condensed it to a paragraph.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I like getting new information on the Reynolds
Cindy
family.
warned me about that.
Cindy, I owe you.
Coffee for sure.
Mary Lou?
Debra, we have an exciting piece of paper to do with that. A lady arrived at an address outside of Glen towards Guy. Okay, I'll come up here. We have an important, the document, the actual land deed from 1804 from Thomas Reynolds to Catherine Reynolds for 200 acres on, I think it's, I better not say what lot and concession, but anyway, it's number 3 highway as you go towards Giles, out of Blenheim, past the golf course and just down a wee ways, really. And it was given to us last year. And that document is, about like this. And beautiful. The ribbon is still attached to the seal and is still embedded into that paper. So it's been well taken care of. We're going to have it put in a shadow box because we don't want people to handle it. So anyway, the way we got it is a man owned that farm about 30 or 40 years ago. And one Sunday afternoon, a lady came and knocked on his door. And she said to him, "This is the land deed for this property that you're on. And so it should stay with the land." And so he kept it. And he sold that piece of land. And he actually took it to Amherstburg, Robert. And they really wanted it.
Yeah.
But he felt it should stay in Kent County. And he came to us with it this past year. And, oh my, it's really something. really sorry to have that. So not too many of those that have survived, right?
I didn't say where it's at. It's at the Heritage House.
For some of you that don't know who I am in Blenheim, I belong to the Historical Society, and we have a home at 45 Sandy Street South, and it's open for research from Tuesday to Saturdays on from 1 to 3, and it's called the Heritage House of Blenheim and District, and that's where it's at. We have a room there that it's owned by Chatham Kent, and we pay rent to them, and they have a museum in part of the house that's set up by them, and then the rest of the house is for our research.
Thanks, Mary Lou. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
On behalf of the Kent County branch, I'd like to thank you for your lovely tour around the wells and where we can find them and what we can do with them, so I really appreciate it. Would you like to care to thank? And since you're here, I'll get you to pull out a name for our volunteer of the month thing. And then we'll go for a 15-minute break, and then we'll start up with our general meeting. Marion Osmond, she's not here. We'll get it.
What do you mean, I don't get to pick another one?
No. Thanks.
Okay, so we're break. We'll break. Who has the calendar?
Oh, I do right here.
Okay, so I'll put this and everything.
Is anyone interested in looking at these war records? If you have, come on, see me up front here.
Sometimes I tend to forget about our members that are far, so I want to thank you for attending this evening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.